Okay, so for example 1, when you're finding the slope from the line, there's two methods you can do. So the first method is exactly what we did for the warm-up, which is picking the 2 points and labeling them. You want to do this when the x values are not evenly spaced. And what I mean by that is if you were to go from 0 to 2, what would you have to add to 0 to get to 2? 2, yeah? Okay, what about from 2 to 5? 3. Okay, so, and then from 5 to 6, this would be plus 1. So these are not the same. Okay, now if we peek over at part B, if you're going from -2 to 0, what would you add? Yeah, great. And then 0 to 2? Yep. And then here? Another 2. So if they're evenly spaced, okay, x values are evenly spaced. I'm going to show you a quicker way to do it, okay? But you can only do it if they are evenly spaced. Okay, so there's two different ways, and it all depends on your x values. So if they're not evenly spaced, you can pick any 2 points that you want. Okay, so every point is xy. Generally, I pick the first 2 in the table, or I just pick 2 of them that don't have negatives in them. So I'm going to choose this point, and I'm going to choose this point. So let's write those out. So this first point, the x is 0, the y is 1, so it's 0, 1. And then the second one is 2, 5. Okay, so the x is your 0, the y is the 1, the x is the 2, the y is the 5. And this is what we're going to label as our x1, y1. So this is your x1, y1. This is your x2, y2. And I want you guys to plug them into the formula, and I'll come around and check that. So, okay, so for your slope, remember, the y's always go on top. So you are going to have 5 minus 1 over 2 minus 0. Okay, so you get 4 over 2. And then you have to check to see if it divides to a whole number. Plus, that's probably something a lot of you can do without your calculator. When you divide, what do you get? Yep. So your slope is going to be 2. So I want you to write m equals. So m is the value for your slope. Yep. So when I say that you can pick 2 points from the table, you can pick any 2 points. And then what I said is if the first 2 points are all positive, I'll choose those. Like see in this one, how this one's a negative. If I want to avoid a negative, I might pick these 2 instead, but it looks like with that one I couldn't avoid it anyway. But you can pick any 2 sets of points. The important thing is you have an x and a y, so 0 and 1, and then 2 and 5. Okay, and that you label those. So these are just like the points that we graphed in 5-1, right? You were given the x's, you had to find the y's, and then you had to plot them. Okay, so for part B, I'm going to show you another method. Now you can only do this if the x values are evenly spaced. So you would have to check that first. And if you see that they are evenly spaced, then you can use the rise over the run. Okay, so you could do the slope is equal to the rise over the run, which the rise, does the rise compare to the x's or the y's? Yes, and then the run is the x's. I'm going to introduce you guys to a new symbol, okay? Well, you tell me if you've seen this before. Sometimes in science, they'll, do you guys know what that means?
Triangle.
No? It means the change in y over the change in x. So that's a little sophisticated for Algebra 1. But yeah, again, it's mainly used in science when you're calculating the change between a few things. But the change in y is going to be what do you have to add or subtract to get to the next value. Okay, so this is going to be the rise. Okay, so yeah, so what would I do to 3 to get to 0? Minus what? 3. To get from 0 to 3, I would minus 3. To get from -3 to -6, I would minus 3. So the rise, the change in the y's, is just the difference in the y's, and that would be -3. Okay, and then the change in x, we already found that. This would be the run. So see how it's a +2? And this would be your slope. Okay, now again, this you can only use in a special situation. The first method you can use anytime. So if you have a table, you can always pick 2 points. Okay, so let's choose this point. We'll double check our work. So the x is 0, the y is 0. I'll choose this one as well. The x is 2, the y is -3. When you're finding your slope and you're subtracting, right, you have the x1, y1, x2, y2. It's always the y's that go on top. So you'd have -3 minus 0 over 2 minus 0. Anything minus 0 is just itself. So look, either method is going to get you your slope. Okay, now with this one, you can't use the rise over run because there's no common number. Okay, and there'll be no common number there as well. Okay, so for example 2, again we're going to find the slope. So the main thing we're working on is finding the slope, but now we're going to use intercepts. So we're going to use something that we did in the past, okay? So when you're finding the intercepts, you are going to plug in 0 for each one. Okay, so you are going to find the x and the y intercepts. That's your step 1. All right, and then Gabe, can you tell me what the equation is going to be for finding the x-intercept?
2 times x plus 3 times y.
But what do we plug in for y? So when you're trying to find the x-intercept, you're plugging in 0. So if you plug in 0, what happens to 3 times 0? No. Anything times 0 will be? Yep, 0. Yep, anything times 0 will be 0. So if this is 0, I just have to set the 2x equal to what value? No, if the 3y goes away, right? This is what we did on our quiz yesterday. If that goes away, what are you left with? 2x equals? Yep. Okay, and then Bree, can you tell me what the equation is going to be for y? Good. Okay, and then I'll give you guys a minute to solve those, and then I want you to write each one as a point. So I want you to solve and then write as a point. Solve, write as a point. Okay, and then Keith, how do you solve this one for x? Yep, and what'd you get for that?
6.
And then when you're writing the point, do you remember which place 6 goes?
6 comes 0.
Good. Okay, so if it's x equals, that's going to go first. Every point is x, y. Okay, great. And then, Avery, for this one, what would you do to both sides? Good. And what'd you get?
4.
Nice. And then your point?
0.
Awesome. Okay, so once you have those 2 points, your second step is just going to be to find the slope, again, using your slope formula. So y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Okay, and this is another situation where you can label these x1, y1, x2, y2. Okay, and then will you guys plug those in for me if you haven't already? Okay, so Ryan, what'd you get in the numerator? Okay, so let's do it together. So what's the y2?
Y2 is 4.
Yeah?
And then 4 minus 0.
Yeah?
And then it's 0 minus 6.
Good. All right, so when you do 4 minus 0 and you get 4, on the bottom, don't forget you have your negative. Now, you always want to reduce it if you can. You can either reduce it yourself because you might notice that both of these numbers are what type of numbers?
Even.
Good. They're even, which means they're both divisible by 2. So if you divide 4 by 2, 2. You divide negative 6 by 2, negative 3. So then this will be your final answer. Another way that you could check to see if it reduces is that ABC button. Okay? All right, and then I want you to do B on your own, and then we'll come around and check that, and once you got that right, I'll give you your practice, okay? All right, so when you guys did this one, there was a little more trouble because of some of you have the negative over the negative. Make sure that when you're doing this, you have your work for writing that out. A lot of you did a really nice job writing out your work, so you should have 5, 0, and then don't forget the negative with the 5. So that can be tricky sometimes. Yeah, that is a tricky thing there. So now, once you get your 2 points, that's when you can plug them into your slope formula. Your x1, y1, your x2, y2. Okay, so then your slope is going to be negative 6 minus 0 over 0 minus 5. So when you have a negative over a negative, you can reduce because a negative 1 goes into each. So you never want to leave something as a negative over a negative. You want to simplify that to 6 over 5.